Alrighty, it is time to do a little examination of just what happened, and I'm trying to be as good faith as I can with the Democrats and the Republicans. I'm not. A lot of people are still. I mean, this is so fresh, so I'm not gonna really, go hard on anybody. Whether it's the Trump fans that are definitely rubbing it in our faces, and you know what, to a degree. I kind of get it, but at the same time, if they're pushing too hard, don't be afraid to call them assholes and just be like, hey, the fact that you like a politician as much as you do is just insane. And honestly, you need therapy. You need to go look at yourself because I think that you have serious parental issues. And then on top of that, I think that we need to really use this as the opportunity to re-examine the Democratic Party. That this is kind of what happened in 2016, except that time we had Bernie Sanders running against Trump and we were already building on that. Now this is a ground up movement, so it's going to really come down to whether we suffer through the neoliberal corporatist bullshit, or we actually push back and we force them to jump on the populist agenda, where we start really pushing for things like, our actual agenda, our progressive agenda, the socialized medicine, workers' rights, all these kinds of things. So leave it to Trump winning to make Bernie Sanders the hero again and have not just, small little outlets in the media or even the left wing and the right wing. They're all coming together to just be like, hey, he's right. You know what? And that's something that we really need to reconcile with. So, oops, I forgot to do that. So here, boom. Sorry, I know. I tried to find one that didn't have the results, but whatever. But here's the thing. Bernie Sanders blasts Democratic Party following Kamala Harris' loss. So let's take a look at what he had to say. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders issued a scathing statement on what he called the Democratic Party's disastrous campaign after VP Kamala Harris lost the presidential election to former President Donald Trump. The independent, who caucuses with Democrats, I like how he gets to do that, but we can't do that as citizens. I have to be registered as a Dem, at least in the state of Illinois, to vote in the Democratic primary, so that's kind of annoying. The independent, who caucuses with Dems, said it should come at no great surprise that the Democratic Party, which has abandoned the working class people, would find that the working class has abandoned them. He couldn't have said it any better. This is the sentiment that skyrocketed him in popularity. This is the reason that you can't just call it populist politics or populist policies anymore. At some point, you have to just be like, this is base policy. These are things that you need to focus on. And if you are going to rely on the working class people, then you need to actually benefit them. Her policy goals were great in theory, but realistically, it was only going to benefit certain sectors of the middle class. It was never really designed to actually benefit the true working class. I'm talking the lower and lower middle class. Now, is there going to be some, retribution from, the Trump team on that one? Probably. And will they be fair in their assessment? And no, they won't. This is kind of why it's kind of weird. If they have all three, oh my God, all three forms of government. Oh my God. I just had the ultimate brain fart. But if they take the House, the Senate, and the presidency, then they have nobody to blame but themselves. And then on top of it, except for they're going to try and blame, some obstruction in the House, because they're going after the checks and balances, like, obviously, on all of this. Don't be surprised if they try to take away the filibuster, especially now that they have 52 seats and they're going to want to pass a lot of legislation with simple majorities. So I would not be surprised if they actually are the ones to get rid of it. But remember, we can use that in our favor down the line here, because even if they try to abolish elections, which I don't think is going to actually happen, there's a lot of hyperbolic shit being said right now that
John Thune's ability to actually
get
that closed door vote. Somebody else that's also up for consideration
this is live.
is Florida Senator Rick Scott. You know,
didn't mean to do that. But yeah, I think that there's just a lot of fear mongering and all that stuff. But at the same time, Project 2025 is a thing, and you got guys like Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller who are just out there going, yeah, this is what's going on. Be prepared. It's just like, do you guys even want to give it a day? I mean, I get that Steve Bannon just came out of jail, but you would think that they wouldn't just go completely mask off right away. Especially the fact that they have to understand that the people that just put them into power are the working class. So if they abandon them, they're going to lose them just as quickly. Although, yeah, us actually saying anything about it, we saw how well that worked out. All right, so let's get back to this. So they abandoned the working class. First, it was the white working class. Now it's the Latino and black workers as well. Sanders continued in his statement, while the Democratic leadership defends the status quo, the American people are angry and want change, and they are right. They are. A longtime progressive champion who ran for president in 2016 and 2020 reflected on the ways Americans continue to experience economic instability, from income and wealth inequality to lack of guaranteed paid family leave and medical leave. Now, the thing about this is, I don't see the Republicans actually doing any of this, which if they do, great. Honestly, I would love to give them credit, but they're not going to do anything for wealth inequality. They're going to maybe give us some tax credit or tax cuts just to shut us up. And if, again, anything that's tentatively good, but if they don't bring prices down, we need to hold them to account. I'm telling you, everybody, every single person, do not let the right bully you into just being complacent and just also being silent just because you think that we don't have a voice anymore, which is insane, by the way. Way to just play into the language of come on, how do you think they felt these last 4 years? Come on, it's the same thing. It's politics. It's not the end of the world. And until it actually is, just stop. We can sit here and be like, yeah, they you can warn all you want, but sitting here and freaking out, legitimately freaking out about it, not healthy. All right, the longtime progressive champion who ran for 2016 reflected on it. Yeah. Okay. Sanders also criticized continuing spending on military aid to Israel. Today, despite strong opposition from a majority of Americans, we continue to spend billions funding the extremist Netanyahu's government. All-out war against the Palestinian people, which has led to the horrific humanitarian disaster of malnutrition and starvation of thousands of children. It's not wrong. Sanders, who won re-election Tuesday, to a fourth 6-year term. Wow. Okay, can I smile? I gotta check. No stroke. Okay, cool. I know it's always my joke, but it's been a rough 2 days, obviously, guys. So we're all coping and we're all kind of trying to get through it. But what I'm trying to do is really, number one, get amped up again, because this is the stuff we should have been doing this time. We really did get tricked into going with Biden, the incumbency, and then going with Harris. That was, you know what? And that turned a lot of people off. Realistically, that did turn a lot of people off. Cast doubt on the party's ability to learn its lesson. Yep. Will the big money interests and well-paid consultants who control the government, the Democratic Party, oh my lord, learn any real lessons from this disastrous campaign? Will they understand the pain and political alienation that tens of millions of Americans are experiencing? No. Do they have any ideas of how we can take on the increasingly powerful oligarchy, which has... No. Again, this is the thing is this is the reason he keeps losing, is because the Republicans and Democrats are both like, no. Don't upset the status quo. don't. That's why Trump won. I mean, also, let's not be disingenuous. Continue to call out the right, but right now is the time to focus on what the left and what the Democrats did wrong. Sanders said very, very serious political discussions are now merited about the path forward. Those of us concerned about grassroots democracy and economic justice, before ending his statement with, stay tuned. I have a feel, yeah. He's definitely going to push. Really? Barron's in Illinois? Ugh. Harris conceded the elections in a speech on Wednesday in her alma mater, Howard University. Whatever. Yes, she conceded. I'm glad. Look, she did the thing that Trump couldn't do for 4 fucking years. All right, let's take a look at some commentary from Zateo, aka Mehdi Hasan, about just what happened and what caused it.
So, Kamala Harris lost, Donald Trump won. We're going to spend a lot of time figuring out what was behind this big Trump win. But for a lot of people, the genocide in Gaza was a red line, and that was one of the big reasons they believe Kamala Harris lost. To talk more about the role that Gaza may have played in all of this, I'm joined by Yusuf Munaya, who's with the Arab...
Make no mistake, I do think that this is going to bite anybody who truly thinks that this is like the teaching moment for the Democrats. I think you're trying to teach the wrong people, and you're only going to suffer for this, and the people that you care about are going to suffer for this, but okay.
Center in Washington, D.C., very well-known Palestinian-American...
How'd that Jill Stein vote work out?
Yusuf, what role? Just jump straight in. Gaza. What role did Gaza play?
Although, you know what? Somebody actually, before I continue, somebody actually did bring up a really good point yesterday. One of my friends just said, what if he did actually, just stop funding? And he did the left pivot, and it was like, I didn't think about that. I'll give him the chance, but based on his language and the phone call with Netanyahu, I'm not being too hopeful.
Play in this crazy election, man.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Mehdi. Look, I think there's been a lot of attention on the Arab and Muslim vote. And while I think that's important because of certain concentrations of the Arab and Muslim community in particular places like Michigan where they could have an outsized impact, that's not the only place and way that Gaza had an impact on this election. And I think it did. And we should be clear.
It did, but it didn't have the most impact. All early indicators are pointing to the fact that the working class was just really pissed off that everything is so damn expensive. I mean, I just had car repairs done, and it's insane. Repair costs have almost doubled since the last time that I got a car repair, and it's only been 2 or 3 years.
No one issue determined the outcome of this election, but several issues combined helped push it in one
Which, that actually speaks of my car. My car's pretty good.
direction. I have been most concerned when looking at how this is going to work out for Kamala Harris about the youth vote more than anything else when it comes to Gaza. Time and time again, we've seen in the polls that it is the youngest demographic of Americans, the youngest demographic of American voters. Yeah,
but I also was saying that this could be a TikTok thing. As much as we are, this got misconstrued yesterday too. So I'm gonna try and say this as carefully as possible. While the message getting out was great, it's just who it was hitting and at what time and how it was kind of shifting the views of these people in order to shift the vote. And I kind of feel like that was targeted, but that's as conspiratorial as I'll get because it happened on TikTok. It happened on X. So
who are most outraged over this policy. And we've also seen
not a
polls
bad thing.
that suggested that swing state voters,
that
and younger swing state voters in particular, would actually be more likely to vote for Harris over this. In 2020, the youngest demographic went to Biden, the under 29 vote, by the largest margin in history. And they came out in larger numbers than ever before. This is where I think actually the Gaza vote had the vote that cared about Gaza had a bigger impact than anything else. We saw a decline.
Yeah, but they didn't care about Gaza at that point. Be fucking honest about this, please. Please. Because I've been pointing out to people that just abandoned Syria at the first sign of any domestic political turmoil. They just literally forgot about the Syrian people.
Harris
so
among that demographic. And we also saw
I've been
a
here
drop
before.
in turnout in that demographic as well. And that had an impact, not just in Michigan, but it probably had an impact in Wisconsin. It probably had an impact in Pennsylvania and other places that were really important for Harris to win to have a chance at winning this campaign.
So clearly you're right, it had an impact. I think in Michigan the margins are so tight now. Maybe she could have won Michigan if the Arab vote hadn't collapsed and the Muslim vote collapsed. The problem is, of course, she didn't just lose Michigan, she lost all the swing states.
She lost all the swing states.
And she almost lost states like New Jersey, New York. Well, not almost lost, but the narrowest margins we've seen in a generation in solidly blue states. So when I see a lot of Palestinian activist supporters online saying, see, Gaza cost you the election, that's not quite true.
No.
Well, again,
no, and that's them trying to take, victory almost, where they're just like, which is weird. Like, how short-sighted are you? Like, are you guys? Okay, sure. You could challenge the Democrats and be pissed off at like the fact that they're in power, but you're still somehow propping up the guy that was just like, yeah, I want to bomb the shit out of Gaza, and I want to essentially just clear it off and make it, into prime real estate. Come on. He has said this. It just wasn't, blasted on TikTok in the media. That's why I was saying that, is like, you guys were only getting one side of that and then going Genocide Joe, but then never thinking like, oh, well, Trump is definitely worse in this situation. And it was pretty much like a veiled criticism of Trump, where you're just like, meh. And then it's also kind of like that. It kind of shows your complacency, where you maybe did think that it was like, Harris, it's the same thing that happened with Hillary, where it's like, yeah, she's got this, so we'll just prepare to fight the battles with them. Like, we're going to preemptively just continue to fight this battle with them and not even try to challenge the right. Just look at the way that the protests worked out. Like, they never went and protested the Republicans because they were like, well, they're not the ones in power. They're not the ones seeking our vote, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Again, how's that going to work out for you? Please explain.
Again, how you isolate the specific impact of this one thing is complicated because, again, it's not just Arab and Muslim voters.
But if I turn it around and say if she'd come out as we wanted her to for an arms embargo, she still would have lost looking at these numbers.
I'm not so sure about that.
And that he needs to turn that around, because he needs to pretend that he has more power than he actually has. No, this was the American working class coming out and this was a referendum on the politicians, because we truly somehow got gaslit into thinking like, yeah, Trump was the man for the working class. And realistically, even like people, a lot of my friends are not political. So when they said that they were voting for Trump, the reason they were doing it was because they were paying more objectively for almost everything. And Biden didn't do enough to bring those costs down. He could have too. Make no mistake, he totally could have, but
that it's more complicated than that is because the biggest challenge that Harris had. Look, we all knew that the Biden re-election campaign was
but
a
you are giving
campaign,
Gaza way too much power on
and
this.
they understood that as well. That's why they switched
as far as like the
the problem
position that it was the needle mover that you thought it was.
Instead of shifting to a different track, she just became the conductor on the same line, headed to inevitable disaster, right? She failed to show that there would be a real difference between her and Joe Biden and how she would govern. And one of the ways that she reinforced that perception.
Okay, but tentatively, Joe Biden is still better at handling this, believe it or not, than what Trump was proposing. If we're going based on words, like what?
Was by
how do people get so up their own ass in their arguments, especially like wearing suits like this, and just go, yeah, I'm going to say this with all seriousness and with all sincerity and just,
repeating the same lines on Israel policy that the Biden administration had. And again, this is not the only issue where she failed to create a difference by Biden, but on an issue that has outraged so many people. It again reinforced this idea that this is more of the same. This was a change election. The Democrats had a tremendous opportunity to make their candidate about change, but they made them about continuity instead.
Continuity, and also they abandoned the left right at the 11th hour, and they focused on this this tiny little fraction of Republicans that are disenfranchised. The fact that we focus so hard on them is going to be the long-term message that was like, or the long-term mistake that is going to be messaged is the fact that we focus too much on Liz Cheney and the Dick Cheney. Because, dude, I was very, very uncomfortable with the fact that I was somehow now voting along party lines with Dick Cheney.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying. My worry from the beginning has been the political strategy, if I can call it that, behind some of the Muslim and Arab American groups who came out and endorsed Jill Stein or said abandon Harris.
All right, I'm glad he's covering this.
If Harris loses, she'll be forced to listen to us. We will have leverage. And I said to them, that's not how the Democratic
Party works.
They don't move to the left after they lose. They move to the right. It's what they did in 2016. It's what they've always done. Even we're speaking the day after the
and
election.
see how he's
just this
twiddling his
morning,
thumbs there? Because he's like,
we're too left-wing. We were
oh,
too
I thought that
pro-trans.
too.
A lot of Democrats saying we need to shift. I don't think the Democratic Party is going to improve its position on Palestine tomorrow, next week, anytime soon as a result of this election result. Am I wrong?
Well, I think what's going to have to happen now is there's going to be a there's going to need to be a very deep introspection among Democratic Party strategists about what happened here.
Yeah, but now we're out of power. So what why? Why would we even try to focus on that as a core issue?
They have a very difficult challenge as a party in trying to keep together a large and fractious and diverse coalition of voters. And they didn't do that successfully this time. Yeah. They lost in a lot of places with groups that they normally do better with, right? And part of that was people who care about Palestine. Look, most people who
part of it
care about this issue probably voted for Biden in 2020.
Yep.
And they didn't come out and do that for Harris, along with millions of other people, by the way.
So let me ask you this. You said most people who care about this issue probably voted for Biden. You're right. You look at the numbers yesterday in Michigan. You look at the election day voters, and these are not final numbers. They're going to change. But election day numbers in Dearborn, Michigan, the capital of Arab America. 45% Donald Trump, 15% Kamala Harris.
See? No, he's calling it as he should. The fact that they voted for Trump and it wasn't just a non-vote for Harris, that flies in the face of the fact that they're voting in their best interest. That's insane. And that needs to be called out, okay? That's just as fucking crazy as any, Republican that's living on the poverty line voting for Republicans because they think they're better on the economy for them personally. That's just as nuts.
I think Jill Stein in the 30s. Trump getting 3 times as many votes as Harris in Dearborn. And he went to Dearborn. To be fair to him, Harris wouldn't step foot in Dearborn. He went to Dearborn. Yeah. But the idea that Arab Americans didn't just reject Harris for understandable reasons, but embrace Trump, isn't that insane? Look, as an Arab American, aren't you stunned to see that number?
I think that if Americans always voted in their political and economic interests, you wouldn't...
Oh, come on. No.
Wouldn't have successful Republican candidates.
No, because then how the hell are we supposed to listen? How the hell are we supposed to take you seriously if you can't even vote in a way that is beneficial to you? You did this thing where you're just like, we're gonna hold the vote, but give it to Trump anyway because we really care about Gaza and the lives that. Please,
candidates, right? The entire theory of the case for Republicans
that
is getting
argument
huge
right
amounts
there,
of people
buddy.
to vote against their interests, especially their economic
So you're saying including Arab Americans?
And, of course,
unless he does better.
Including Arab Americans. And by the way, Arab American
I'll retract
voters
all that.
are diverse. They're not
right
monolithic.
Now,
they don't just vote on one issue. And you know what? There's a lot of Palestinian Americans in Chicago as well, and that went solidly for Harris. So, there's a lot of different ways to look at this. The more important question, though, is why, as a campaign, did the Harris camp cede this opportunity to Trump when all of the warning signs were flashing on the importance of this issue? And she didn't have to come out with a revolution
because she was weighing whether or not the Republicans who are Zionists were more important to try and court over the already hard left that she felt were going to be kneecapped into just, voting for her as the lesser of two evils.
Very different policy on this, but to send the message that there was going to be some difference. Yep. And I think the biggest impact it's had is not in the few people that voted for Donald Trump, but in the much larger number of people who felt that both of these candidates were horrible on this issue and didn't deserve their vote.
And of course, Donald Trump at least pretended to give it out, right? That's what he's a master.
Well, and he went to Dearborn.
He went to Dearborn.
Whereas Harris didn't.
He said, I'm the anti-war guy. Liz Cheney's a warmonger. I'll save Muslims. I'll give you peace. Obviously, he's a bullshitter, but he said it. He pretended, which she wouldn't do. Jill Stein was very...
Yeah, but the fact that everybody takes him at his word for the things that they want to hear, and then they immediately go, yeah, but we know he's full of shit. It's like, you guys can't do this. And it's insane.
Popular in Arab American communities.
How am I supposed to take you seriously when it's like
interview with her on Zateo?
But then they're like, oh, well, Biden said this and he didn't do it. Come on. You suck.
From a lot of Muslim and Arab Americans. In the end, she didn't get the most votes in Michigan. Nationally, I think she's at 1%. She got nowhere near the 5% that the Greens were hoping she would get. Where are we left in terms of third-party politics? There was a lot of energy around the idea of a third party because of Gaza. It didn't really work out again.
Yeah, I think that most people who cast their vote for Jill Stein were casting a protest vote against the Democratic Party.
Again, how'd that work out? And how did that move the needle for the future of the Green Party? Again, just being protests. This is why she sucks. Because let's see what she does. Let's see how she coalesces this. Let's see exactly how many members of the Green Party she brings into the next election. Then, again, this will be here. This will be logged in. So I can go back to this video and be like, hey, you know what? I was wrong. But
people who
I don't
cast
expect to
protest
do
votes
that.
didn't vote for Jill Stein. They did it by either not voting
Yep.
or writing in something completely different
Or Trump and Dim.
or voting down ballot
Yep.
and not voting for the presidential candidate.
Yep.
But the bigger question is, again, we knew
Duh.
this was coming.
Yes.
That lane was left open. That opportunity was ceded. Why?
Okay.
And I want to say about the Liz Cheney thing, by the way, because there was a clear strategy here on the part of the Harris campaign. And that approach was, look, there are a couple 100,000 people in Michigan who in the Republican primary voted for Nikki Haley.
Yes.
Let's go get those voters. Let's appeal to those
And there's
voters.
no evidence they
right?
got.
Well, and the evidence that we have every
No.
election is that the most important determining factor in voting outcomes is party identification.
Agreed.
Republicans vote for Republicans, Democrats vote for Democrats. Why the strategy was, hey, let's cede the anti-war lane, let's cede the Palestine stuff, let's ignore this, and try to go after people who are never going to vote for us to begin with. This is a serious question.
Yeah, well, again, because they overestimated like the Liz Cheney Republicans, the Lincoln Project. Like, I got to be honest, the Lincoln Project did not help because they really did like start preaching this like whole, well, we are the disaffected Republicans, we are the rhinos, and there's a lot of us that we can help the Democrats move the needle. And then on top of it, they also ceded ground with independents. So I don't buy
The
that.
strategists need to ask themselves.
And they're doubling down, as I say. People who thought that they were going to suddenly shift to the left. You have people like Richie Torres, pro-Israel Democrat in New York, very emboldened today, tweeting that this is the far left's fault. We need to abandon the far left. So,
Perhaps the problem was that Cheney wasn't the candidate herself.
well, let me ask you this. Let's look forward. Donald
Well, no, well, I guess sure, but this is the thing. Everybody like neolibs and neocons, but this on the online, political spaces, that's kind of thrown around a little bit too much. But for real, the neocons and the neolibs are the ones that kind of created this new purple like party that they really, really wanted to be the new populist party. Like if Harris won, that's what it would be in their eyes, because then they'd be like, look, we're real Americans. We have bipartisanship, blah, 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 blah. When realistically, they misread the room on this one where it's like, no, we do need to court the left. We do need to actually placate to our base. I misread that one.
Trump will be president on January 20th, 2025. What happens to Gaza? What happens to the West Bank with Miriam
Yep, there we go.
Adelson pushing into annex the West Bank, with David Friedman, his former ambassador, who's an annexationist, probably be given a big job. Jared Kushner, who says Gaza has great beachfront property back in the White House. How bad is it going to get for Palestinians in 2025?
Well, I think it's
The fact that the Golan Heights were just given as a aside.
going to continue to get worse, and that's not really going to be a function of who's in the White House.
Oh, what the fuck? What? Dude, what? Then why? Why would you even make these arguments to try and pretend like you hold the keys to the reins of power for the Democratic Party based on your constituency? What?
You don't think it'll be worse because of Trump and people?
No,
around?
I think it's going to get worse, but that is not going to be a function of who is in the White House. I think this administration, the Biden administration,
Okay. Really? Okay.
has effectively ceded the driver's seat to Benjamin Netanyahu as it is. And I don't expect that to be that much different with Trump in power. Where I do think it'll be interesting is if Netanyahu being in the driver's seat brings the United States into direct confrontation with Iran in some significant way. That would actually go against some of the things that Trump said and talked about in his campaign. He's not beholden to anyone anymore because, at least as I understand it, he's not allowed to run again unless they go and change the laws, like many sort of,
Or ignore the laws.
or ignore the laws, as many authoritarians around.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, if he does do that, I don't expect a lot of Republicans to go up in arms and be like, oh, the Constitution. They're just going to blindly go, yeah, we want our guy to stay in power. Which, again, why? Why do we even like engage with people like that where it's like, we're not playing on the same field because that's literally anti-American. If you are against the Constitution of America, I'm sorry, you're anti-American. By definition,
around the world have done when they're told their time is up. But I don't see a
Mehdi just like,
huge difference in terms of American policy between these two campaigns. And most people
Wow.
who are looking at Palestine, I think, see it the same way. Nobody could have imagined the depth of anti-Palestinian hatred that came from the Biden administration.
So I've been agreeing with a lot of what you say. I think you're going to see much more anti-Palestinian hatred coming forward, and I think we will see it.
Yeah, no, just because you didn't see it from the right, and you like, again, you got them blinders on, bud.
But
also, this is kind of like that whole, I forgot about the Jared Kushner thing. I am kind of playing into the whole idea that we do have the memories of fleas.
I hope to be proven wrong. Last question, give us some hope. I remember when Jamal Bowman and Cory Bush were defeated by AIPAC dollars in their primaries. You did a tweet, if memory serves me correctly, saying, actually, there's some good news here. This is a sign of strength. Lay out for us any kind of hope you see in the campaign for Palestinian rights in the US.
Well, look, I think the future is brighter precisely because it is younger folks who are leading the way on this. But what we have seen in this election and over the past year is that a lot of people with a tremendous amount of money who are heavily invested in the American political process. Miriam Adelson gave Trump $100 million. AIPAC put $100 million into Democratic primary campaigns alone.
Jamal Bowman lost because of that.
That is a major obstacle. But continuing to keep U.S. policy in the direction that it is as it relates to Israel is only getting more expensive because it is getting more unpopular. I don't think that's going to stop. And I think one of the things that we may very well see among Democrats with this Trump administration is that they may rediscover that there's a problem with this kind of support for Israel in the way that we saw more during the first Trump administration.
We will see.
Yeah, we'll see. But I don't expect that. I think that the AIPAC lobby is a lot more powerful than you're even giving it credit for. And I also think that you guys really overemphasize the electorate and how much they care about this. I'm sorry. Like, yes, our base cares. But the overall electorate who did shift this election, who a lot of the left ignore, a lot of the left love to just write them off as just, these centrist normies, blah, 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 blah. And then they wonder why they lost. And why it's like, why is there this problem with messaging? It's like, cause you're kind of a dick. Like you kind of come across like I know better. All right. Let's take a look at one more video, surprisingly, again, Mehdi Hasan.
So, what went wrong is the question a lot of people are asking right now. Progressives, liberals, leftists, Democrats. Joining me now to talk about what went horribly wrong is Don Calloway, Democratic Party strategist, CEO of Pine Street Strategies. Ryan Grimm, progressive journalist, co-founder of Dropsite News, my former colleague at The Intercept. Don, Democrats, what the F happened?
We don't know. I do know a couple of things. First of all, this was the first time at 45 years old that I know that what I thought was going to happen was purely dictated by what was being fed through my algorithm. And, I fear for our kids because I certainly was not immune to it. And it completely, I was nose blind to the possibility. Yeah, the vibes were off. I was completely blindsided by the possibility that, it's going to be close, but the landslide in his favor was completely unbeknownst to me. I think there are some practical concerns or some things to think about.
Landslide? It wasn't a landslide. I mean, it was a landslide for the...
About how possible was it with a 120-day campaign? There's a reason these things are protracted and they're 2 years because it takes standing up a massive special vehicle corporation with a very unique purpose. And I don't know that was possible to do in 120 days. I also think, lastly, it's important to recognize that Donald Trump won this second administration 20 years ago when The Apprentice started. And that's where we are in terms of our collective brain space in America. Donald Trump has been the most famous man in America for a long time, and that didn't diminish, particularly even though he's been in the news every single day over the last 4 years while Biden's been president. So that name recognition is just extremely hard to penetrate, and Kamala Harris wasn't able to do it.
I'm not.
Ryan, incumbency is a problem across the world right now. Post-pandemic in the UK, the Conservative government got wiped out. In France, Macron got hit. In India, Modi lost his majority.
The ANC took a hit.
ANC, South Korea. How much of this was Democrats losing the election? How much of this was Trump winning the election?
I mean, I think it's some of both, and I think it's fair to put it in the global context because I have criticisms of how the Democratic Party has aligned itself with a more upper middle class, section of the electorate over the last 20 plus years, maybe 40 years, depending on when you count the realignment starting. But I have to be honest and say it's happened in every developed country around the world, and so that suggests that there's something fundamental going on in these Western economies.
Maybe it's this, and this is how you squash grassroots movements,
including Japan.
Come on, man.
That pushes this kind of cultural liberalism into kind of opposition with a working class, which then moves into the center right, which is only then buttressed by a migration crisis, which you saw in Europe 10 years ago. Like we witnessed that unfold, after the war in Syria.
Yeah, but after this, then what? Then what? And the thing is, if he actually does like mass deportations, just watch the spin where they're like, well, we had to do the mass deportations, but your guys are going to have some hardships in the economy. Like, we could be in a frickin' depression and they're still going to be like, oh, we need Trump to bring us out of this depression. Now, that's what scares the crap out of me, is just how buried deep in his ass most Trump supporters are. And I'm just going to keep calling that out as long as I possibly can without it getting completely, redundant. But it's messed up the way that they idolize this guy. And these people are Christians, so or claim to be Christians, like they're base, but that is so antithetical to everything that the Bible was about and everything that Jesus was about. Like, somehow they convinced themselves that Jesus Christ was a gun-toting conservative, capitalist. It's insane.
Go ahead. You were.
Look, if Ryan Grimm is going.
Oh, and they also convinced themselves that it's like, Jesus was anti-tax. It's like, what?
Get into the real shit, I'm happy to do that too. At the end of the day, I'm headed up to Howard University right now, and it is the Mecca. It is an institution which we have so much pride in. But at the end of the day, Howard is Black Harvard, right? These are two extraordinarily elite, privileged institutions that we send the best of ours to, and they're finishing schools. But for our politics to be driven by either H, the Harvards or the Howards of the world, the Democrats learned today that that's not where the majority.
Yeah, but that's not as much of a problem. Like, look at J.D. Vance, please. Again, the elite part, yeah, only on the left does this actually track. No, it's the way that the elite also refuses to actually capitulate and work with the working class.
Of working class, lower middle class, or God forbid, poor people in this country are.
God forbid, poor people.
And their policies are garbage, but somehow, some way, Republicans found an algorithm to tap into that.
Was it a mistake? Was it a mistake to basically close your campaign alongside Liz Cheney and Mark Cuban?
Yes.
Obviously it was.
2,000%.
For sure. I don't know.
And,
billionaires.
John Zucker, this organizer out of Lancaster, I thought had a good phrase for it. He said people call that tacking to the right or tacking to the center, but it was tacking to the top. It was tacking to the elite, and it was solidifying the idea that Trump was already playing into with his right-wing populist tropes that Democrats are the party of elites, and the Cheneys are elites. Like that's, and they stand in for warmongering.
For some bizarre, inexplicable reason, Donald Trump and Elon Musk are not elites.
Yeah, again, there's no consistency, and look at the way that, look at this body language. It's you. It is you. It's the way that you message. Honestly, it's the fact that you guys cannot, you can always hyper focus on the easier targets without going after the bully targets, because you know that they're probably going to come after you.
That's populism.
We know they are, but they're perceived, they've been coded.
Right. Right-wing populism allows for certain, and that's the purpose.
Yeah, but right-wing populism doesn't ever actually. What did right-wing populism do for us, tentatively? Because nobody can actually tell me what the tax cuts were. They can only tell me that Trump cut taxes and the economy was better.
Of right-wing populism.
Without giving Obama any credit, because they only go to the Trump economy. Our economy, apparently, according to Trump supporters, only started functioning the second that he became president. Everything else that came before that, meh.
Is to distract the attention that ought to be on all of the 0.1% and all of the 1% over to immigrants down here at the bottom, or some set of other, and then stand-ins for the 1%. And the stand-ins here are Hollywood, the media, Howard and Harvard.
Yeah.
But let's be clear.
And I think I will say that you're spot on. And also, there's a particularly pernicious element of those guys owning the infrastructure of information in a way that's never been, to purchase.
Before they just had
Twitter,
Murdoch, now they've got Murdoch and Musk.
Yeah, and Twitter, and the internet, and all Bezos, all this. It's a.
I mean, Ryan, just to pick up on the information point, people said to me yesterday, well, 28% of the country think the country's going in the right direction. You cannot get re-election when there's that many people are negative about the direction of the country. But that negativity is not based on anything real, and maybe you'll disagree with me. Obviously, people are suffering in America, but they've always suffered in America. In terms of the big trends, we know the US economy is doing very well compared to its peers. We know that crime is actually down, not up.
Yep.
We know that border crossings, the big issue for the right, are lower now than when.
Yeah, but they didn't campaign on any of this. That's the thing. They barely focused on that, and their messaging was awful on
left
it.
office. And yet, thanks to the information environment, people don't know this or they don't believe it.
Well, prices at the grocery store got
Yes. Ryan Grimm's about to make a good point here.
High and stayed high.
Yep.
Rent is high.
Never went down.
Mortgage rates are crazy.
Mortgage rates still crazy, even though the Fed the federal interest rates came down. What?
Climate
Come on.
Is creating all kinds of anxiety. It's not great. People.
And it's only working for the fucking top. The reason that they think it's okay is because the upper middle class, they're like, we're fine. but we're the ones suffering.
Like our kids are on like phones too much. Like there's a mental health crisis like we've never seen before. Things are not great.
Those are not partisan issues, right?
No, they're not.
That's a general.
No,
Trump has no solutions.
But they express themselves through a type of anxiety, which then Trump tries to channel.
Yes, and then you have your kid, and then somehow the second that somebody that doesn't have a child brings up, hey, maybe you shouldn't be giving your child a phone or an iPad at this age, they tell you, oh, wait till you have a kid. Yeah, okay.
In his direction, and I think I'm curious for your take on this. There's that famous Schumer quote where he says, for every rural vote we lose in central Pennsylvania, we're going to pick up 2 in the suburbs. And what I think and I understand his calculation. He's like, rural population of America is 18%. We could lose them all. And as long as we have the suburbs and the cities, we still win. But what he misunderstood is that there is actually a cultural through line among working class people who live in rural areas and working class people who live in suburban areas, exurban areas, and working class people who live in the cities. And so
yeah, it's weird. It's almost like we all talk to each other and hang out, and not everybody works at that hangs out with each other are all of the same tax bracket. Weird.
You picked up those suburban votes, but at the cost not just of
it's almost like you don't understand how America functions.
That one guy in central Pennsylvania, but of other people who have similar lives but happen to live in the suburbs in Bucks County, and then you see Philadelphia, Allentown, Pittsburgh, all across New Jersey, like the narrow. Like,
my worry is
there's not enough suburbs to win.
My worry is that what does it say for us as a country that we can identify all these problems? But Donald Trump is the solution. This idea, people say to me, inflation is what drove a lot of this, right?
Yep. Yeah. No, it's not even like this is where you guys are so up your own ass on your analysis on this to just ignore the fact that it's like it was just the other guy. This was a referendum on who was in power, and it's just the other guy. And there are too many Americans that think like that, but it's just how it is.
Okay, but you've just elected a man who's going to drive up prices with tariffs.
But
who said he would? Who said he would? The thing is, I'm even going to give the credit. I don't think he's going to do it because he is going to get advised, and then they're going to just be like, hey, listen, this is going to be go terribly for you optics wise.
Policy. There's no policy space. There's no substantive solution that he presented that justified him as the savior for any of these very serious challenges that you've identified. And that's why we cannot diminish 2 things. First of all, he ran against a black woman. Even though he offered nothing, he ran against a black woman, and there's racism and sexism baked into it. Yep. Especially dangerous when you merge that with the private ownership of information vehicles.
Oddly enough, I don't think the sexism played as much of a
vehicles. We have never faced this in our country, and it is completely wide open for some smart progressive to figure out how we're going to overcome that. But I have to imagine that the successful campaigns of the next 10 years will have to look dramatically different than Democratic infrastructure has looked like in the.
Gee, it's almost like the most successful Democratic campaigns out of the last 10 years was twice, 2016, 2020, with a certain Bernie Sanders and the grassroots movement that was behind him.
Profession that raised Ryan and I.
And I can say, and maybe you had this experience too.
It's weird how they just are ignoring that.
Somebody who's in the independent media, our show on Breaking Points last night consistently had close to 100,000 people watching, millions of viewers. No attention from Democrats, lots of attention from Republicans. I hope that this is the last Democratic nominee who says no to Joe Rogan. Like, even if you have to go to the studio.
Oh, Jesus, really? All right, that's it. No, you do have to go to Rogan as much as you. Yeah, but if that's where we're going with the analysis, it's like, okay, listen, even if she had gone on Rogan, how is that going to change the vote? I'm sorry. Like, now they're just grasping at straws. So, yeah, that was kind of disingenuous. But anyway, I think that just with those 2 videos, we kind of got a good look at, number one, where the Democratic establishment thought they were and where the party actually stood, where voters actually stood and what they actually cared about. Again, the fact that the prices didn't come down and there weren't price caps and nobody. Yeah, I don't know. You can say all this stuff about executive actions, but realistically, they're just you can look at Biden letting the child tax credit lapse. And he was he at one point was just yeah, it's for the budget. Okay. Keep wondering why you lose. Anyway. Alrighty. Well, I think that honestly, we're going to be doing a little bit of this for the next few months, especially before he actually takes office, because I'm I'm trying to be as fair as possible. I'm trying to not doomer as much because that does absolutely no good. And yeah, I am trying to kind of look at like how we can organize and win the next election. So surprise, surprise, it's go a little farther left and work within the populist realm of the worker class. Maybe that's where you should start. Anyway, I appreciate you guys checking out my content, especially today. I understand that watching political content, especially as a left-leaning consumer, is going to be a little rough. I do not blame anybody that is just kind of tuning out of political content, but that makes all of you who are here that much more special. I really appreciate you guys being here and taking this dive with me and being willing to look at what went wrong and the problems that we can fix and try and coalesce from here. So but truly do appreciate you guys being here. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I have memberships available and super thanks if you want to leave me a tip. I'm going to be going live on Monday, long term now, so look out for that. I'm going to be making my announcement of exactly what time. But yeah, I will see you in the next one.